What am I demonstrating? I'm demonstrating what Mommy would say, oh, you're wasting electricity, you're going to drive up the electric bill. Stop playing with the light switch and leave it alone. Turn it on, leave it on, or turn it off and leave it off. Well, you know what, Mommy? You're wrong. I realize something now from something else that I was reading this morning that I did not share with you, and I think it's time I share it. Because I realized something about switching circuits that is something, I think I had a discussion with Philip Nelson, and it's worth repeating because I'm seeing it, evidence of it, in various places. Not only is there evidence of a phase relation difference that is adjustable such that a generator can produce more, especially when the load is really weighed heavily upon it. But there's another situation in which when we let me go back. Let me start with the example. The example is this invention somebody came up with in Australia in which he drives a generator with a motor, but he has belts connecting the two. And he may have more than one linkage. In fact, there's a patent that goes back to Spain around the turn of the century, which is predicated on this very concept, but this fellow made improvements, this guy in Australia. And the idea is you can create a closed-loop system in which your generator can feed back power to your motor and still have some left over, provided there's slippage. In other words, the belts that connect the various flywheels or gears that eventually leads to the linkage between the motor and the generator. In other words, you have various linkages, multiple linkages, and if they all have slippage, you actually end up producing an overunity situation. Now, how can that be? Well, it's not hard to figure out. Bedini, Tesla, so many people have come up with what we know of as switching circuits, in which the voltage is high and the amperage is low, so that your wattage or total consumption of power may not have changed a whole lot, but the configuration, even in a DC situation, is going to be that kind of a weird imbalance. So I think what's happening with slippage is that there's a spike of a load imposed upon the source. Normally we think of a spike as the source spiking. You know, like a Bedini switching circuit or a Tesla switching circuit creates a voltage spike, but we're measuring what's coming from the source, or the switching circuit, what's allowing the energy coming from the source to come out as a spike. But this is a situation in which the load is demanding in a very spiked fashion, making a spike of a load upon this circuit. And I think the net effect is the same, because what Philip Nelson and I were talking about, and this is what William Line talked about. William Line is a firm believer that the power generator company is only putting out seed power, which I would liken to the conductor of an orchestra. He sets the beat, 60 cycles per second, but not providing a whole lot of power for the rest of us. But it's our load, namely when we turn the load on and off, in which we create overunity. But unfortunately, we run our systems continuously, and they are not switching circuits. But the additional unfortunate feature to the setup is that we're not rewarded for the free energy that we create by turning our appliances on and off rapidly. The power grid gets the benefit. We don't get it. And in fact, we'll be charged for it. In fact, we're being charged for the energy that we create. If what William Line is saying is correct, it may not be the watt-hour meter that generates the excess power, because I think what's happened is the power company has figured out how to make power along the route. I noticed when I was up in Packwood, Washington, all the power cables are not, unlike the city, they're up elevated. You can see them. And the trees, you know, when there's a windstorm, they're constantly knocking down the power, and then we're out of power at least once a year. Well, every couple poles is a transformer, and from the transformer, each time there's a transformer, there's a direct link to ground. So I suspect the whole grid is set up not just to protect from surges to ground out, but to also provide for overunity if it should be required. Okay, there's a limit to the system, obviously. But I think what happens, though, is if you can get a brownout or a blackout in any one of two conditions, at the very least two. So it isn't just a failure of the power company to provide power, but it's the failure of the power company to soak up the excess of power should a surge occur. Then there are all kinds of relays that trip to provide for a condition of failsafe should a surge occur. And that's when you start getting brownouts and blackouts, is because somebody tripped the relay because there was a backwash of power for whatever reason. And we'll never know who started it, right? Power company might be able to locate it when they analyze what happened, the microseconds of what happened, but we won't know. Well, this is what I think is what's happening in a fluid drive. Tesla invented the fluidic transmission system, in which you can have a fluid coupling between your engine and your wheel shaft, your drive wheel. Why would he want that? I mean, we're so used to micromanaging everything. We're like control freaks. Yet slippage allows for voltage load spikes to be made upon the source. And this is exactly what happens in that fellow in Australia who had the slipping belts turning the pulleys on his arrangement connecting his electric motor with his electric generator. Doesn't matter whether it's AC or DC system. Just having the slippage alone created overunity sufficient to run a closed loop system and have a little left over to light bulbs or whatever. You know, not a tremendous overunity, but enough to show that you've got a system that can run continuously until it breaks down. So-called perpetual motion, just not a perpetual motion machine, but perpetual motion. So this slippage is represented by Tesla's orientation when he started to move into fluidic systems, either air or water or whatever. So when we look at his compressed air-driven electric generator from 1894, his fluid transmission system for cars, and the special generator that William Line has told us about in his book Pentagon Aliens, towards the back of the book. This special generator of Tesla, which we have come to call his trimetal generator, because for some reason the use of copper, aluminum, and iron in a coordinated fashion enhances the output. But when you think about it, just the slippage alone is going to create overunity, because he's got compressed air running a piston, and the piston is a solenoid magnet running in and out of a magnetic field, either a permanent magnet or an electromagnet or any kind of arrangement possible. And so you've got slippage between the drive propulsion driving this thing and the thing being driven by the drive source. And that slippage is enough to give a give and take such that there are surges to the load imposed upon the source. It's like the inverse negative image of a switching circuit creating spikes from the source. These are spikes of demand or load made upon the source. Apparently it works both ways. So this is all the more reason to assume a confirmation, additional confirmation, from prevailing knowledge that slippage, not being micromanaging and having to control everything, but allowing for nature to make up some of the difference, a little bit, small amounts, controlled amounts of asymmetry, worked into a closed system, a symmetrical closed system, helps to allow for overunity in modest amounts. You know, not tremendous, but small enough to maybe to cover your losses and have a little left over to spare. And that's big business just to be able to do that. If you can do that, if anybody can do that, that's a big improvement. So it's a very interesting concept that slippage is part of the system, and something William Law never described. I never asked him because I wouldn't know to ask when I was corresponding with him. And it's not in the story that he provides us. It's something we've had to glean from background information. We just have to become well read, at the very least, or very thoroughly experimental. Either way, to either have a lot of knowledge of other people's experience, or a lot of experience of our own, or a mix between the two. Ideally, in all likelihood. So slippage now is a very important concept because it's equivalent to voltage spikes, which can be either load-oriented voltage spikes, or excuse me, spikes of load or spikes of supply. Let's forget voltage, because it can be mechanical spikes. So load spikes or supply spikes, due to slippage of one sort or another, either a fluid drive or a loose-fitting belt drive on a pulley system, gear system. This is a very provocative idea. Gosh, I'm kind of sorry to myself and to you that I overlooked this. Slippage in the scheme of Tesla's special generator that I'm currently envisioning, in which reciprocation was not the mode of kinetic movement, but spiraling, counter-spiraling of two sets of air masses driving two sets of stacked homopolar disks of Michael Faraday. The turbulence created by those two turbulent air masses intermingling, that disturbance of the counter-rotating turbulent airflows, the two counter-rotating vortexes of airflow, that creates the slippage. The slippage that induces overunity along the lines of the Chas-Campbell system. And this is on freeenergyinfo.com, chapter 4. And that's where I get the reference from concerning pulleys that have a little bit of play to them, and such that they rapidly, periodically slip, so that there's a rapidly periodic jerking action that you can't see when it's running at high speed because it happens so fast. And it's this slippage that, of course, is the basis of what fluid drive constitutes in my envisionment of Tesla's special generator. So if we have two counter-rotating sets of disks, every other disk is rotating in the opposite direction, and we have two counter-rotating air masses, the turbulence created by those air masses colliding with each other is what's going to cause resistance for the opposing set of disks, versus, the airflow of one creating resistance for the other, and vice versa. And it's going to be erratically periodic, in other words turbulent, but it's going to be slippage at high speed. And this is where the overunity comes from, that's analogous to the Chas-Campbell system, which is replicated by, Jacob Bezier analyzed it. I don't think he replicates it. Yeah. But it is replicated by Jose Luis Garcia del Castillo, patent number ES 2119690, October 1998. It's a Spanish patent. Further down on that page.